on the last several years, spending a lot of time with both of them, and my wife and I are politically very engaged people and have been for a long time. My wife has been a Republican for much of our married life, and it took running for governor to get her to go to undeclared before the end of May. So if you got anybody that you're married to that you love very much and you found out after you were smitten that they are in the wrong party, then run for governor. But that's not my message tonight. I can tell you just a little bit more. There's a lot of other good things. I remember in 06, before, a couple hours before the memory of the letter was recounted, I was working for Beth Hollingworth. That was wonderful. There you go. And I was her manager for her executive council race that she won that night. And we were over at Hampton, where I think Las Olas is now. We're in the same plaza. And I had to bust it over to get to Carol's event. The joy just kept going. I just ran out of hours. It was an amazing night. But the last 15 years of being involved in Democratic politics have been wonderful. And we've seen some really high ups. That was one of them. We've had some tough nights too. But for those of you that have been around longer than I have, the ups are happening more frequently. And we can't take them for granted. But it means that we're getting pretty darn close to being a reliably blue state. When we work, when we have strong candidates that can communicate, especially our disgruntled Republican friends that were referred to a moment ago, we have an opportunity here to send a message, a very positive, proactive message. They can take a lot of folks that I've talked to since I've gotten in the race just in the last month or so, who are Republicans that this isn't the party they used to know. Things have changed, and they're very uncomfortable, and they're looking for a place, common sense, pragmatist, progressive values that they may not know, they may not have used that term to describe it, but are very real in their lives. And we are a place for them if we project the right message with authenticity and a lot of passion. So let me back up for a step. I'm a Manchester born and bred guy. My folks are from Quebec. French was the first language of the house. Dad's Penny Carpenter, still is, 7 years old, still working. My mom worked in the Pandora Mills until just before I was born. And then stitched the boots, the innards of the boots at home until I got old enough to go to school. Working class family, very proud of it. We've had a lot of ups and downs in our lives growing up and experienced financial hardship, experienced bankruptcy during the healthcare crisis when I was a teenager trying to get to be the first family member to go to college. And I've seen that. And one thing I just want to note before really getting into the meat is my folks are examples of folks that were thinking between Bernie and the Donald. And it's to some that may seem like a difficult, how on earth could you be considering voting? But there are tens of thousands, if not more, New Hampshireites that were thinking about that because they want to communicate their deep frustration and anxiety about what's going on. My folks still feel deep anxiety about the economy. They loved Bill Clinton, they love him, still love him, and they're anxious. And they want to communicate that to all of us. And I think that no matter what antipathy, frankly, and I think most of us have towards Mr. Trump, I am aghast at what he says and what he would do. There is a message getting sent, and I think we need to listen to it, and we need to make sure in our messages that we're welcoming to those that are expressing anxiety, and we let them know this is a place in the party where we can assuage that anxiety with really good ideas and really good people. So, why the heck am I running for governor? 10 weeks ago, I didn't think I was running for governor. I've been around politics for a long time. This is not something I thought I'd be doing in 2016. A good friend of mine, Stephanie Shaheen, we're about the same age. She lives like I do in Portsmouth. And she called me up and she said, I'm not running for governor. And I got one question for you, Steve. Why the heck aren't you thinking about this? And I gave her many good reasons. I'm a very happy guy. I've got a wonderful family. Work is great. Been out in the private sector. But at the end of about 45 minutes of argument, it was compelling enough. I know the politics, the issues I've always cared about, to go home and think about it for 2 or 3 weeks. And then came to the conclusion, and that's why I'm in a place like this tonight. At the end of March, I announced I was running. I have great respect for the other folks running, certainly on our side of the aisle. I think highlighted Ron and Mark. But I think there are a couple of key differences, and that they need to be said. One is that I think there are key priorities from my time, my experience, where I saw important policy that we need to get done in the next 2 years and beyond from the governor's office and in Concord that I weren't sure were being highlighted. I can explain those in a second. The second thing is, once you get to that point, there are solutions that are specific that we need to consider and that take years of experience. I used to audit cities for a living. I was a mayor who, those of you around know, I was a very data-driven guy, technocratic when I needed to be, but deep passion about the way to get things done based on best practices around the country. I was the Director of Corporate Relations for UNH for several years, spoke in a completely non-political context for several years about why businesses come to a state, why they stay, why they grow, why they don't. What are the barriers to growth? What are the barriers to entrepreneurism, which is where most net new job creation comes from in the state of this country? And I wasn't hearing much about that, not because people didn't want to say them or they were hiding them. It's because I think it required a unique set of experiences to get there. And of course, the experience of somebody who grew up as a son of immigrants in a blue-collar household. I hear too much demagoguery about immigrants. We are not a great country in spite of immigration. We are a great country because of immigration. And I think that you need somebody that can speak about it in a first-person way with tremendous passion and first-hand experience that can combat that and say, listen, from somebody who's been there and done that. We are great, we are growing, we're the strongest country in the world. No matter what Mr. Trump may say, because we have a growing population, and most of that growth is coming from immigrants. It's an exciting part of our story, our history, and of our future. And then the last part is, can we get somebody as our nominee who has the ability to communicate to folks that are on the fence in this election cycle, that can talk to people whether they live in Manchester, where I was born and raised, Portsmouth, where I had the honor of governing, or up in the North Country, where most of my family that isn't still in Quebec lives. I was in Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago for a funeral of one of my aunts, and all the family was up there, Pittsburgh, West Stewartstown, Colebrook, Columbia, you name it. They're asking for the signs. They're asking for them in French, but they're asking for the signs. And they are looking in every corner of the state for somebody that can connect with what they're thinking about on a day-to-day basis. So let me back up for a quick second. Some of the issues. There are quality of life, which is our key advantage. The New Hampshire advantage, you know, for years you hear the capital A advantage, NHA, New Hampshire advantage. The New Hampshire advantage is not simply that we have a low tax structure, though we do. It's the quality of life. And for most of the last 40 years, it has included quality workforce. Because of demographic changes, that is becoming more difficult to sustain. And that's the first thing we have to say. There are 3 specific things that in all the businesses, 100, 150 of them that I spoke with, they would say repeatedly. First of all, let me tell you one thing they didn't say, whether they were self-described conservative, liberal, or apolitical. I did not hear a single person say to me in a boardroom, a CEO, a COO, a head of HR, a head of engineering, if you just cut the business profits tax from 8.5 to 7.9 over a 4-year period, the magic would begin. That happens 0 times. This Republican-led Senate and House basically said to Governor Hassan, who opposed this tax cut, I think rightly, if you want a budget passed, you're going to have to do that. So I understand why we got there. Let me tell you that fully implemented, this $33 million a year of revenue that we are not collecting, that the business people that are receiving the benefit of that, they did not ask for that tax cut. Okay, but I tell you what they did ask for. They asked for K-12 education. The #1 reason why a business chooses to come to a place, stay in a place, the #1 way they recruit people to come and work at their business instead of somewhere else in America, at a time when we need to be recruiting people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s to come to this state, is the quality of the public school system in and around where that business would be. It is unquestioned, it is virtually universal in all of the business settings I was in. And it's common sense too when you think about it. When I was mayor, we had some difficulties with some of our elementary schools. We have exciting new young leadership over the 10 years. We have wonderful new teachers that have entered the system. And now we have 3 of the 8 highest rated elementary schools in New Hampshire over the last 10 years. And we did it by never having taxes going up higher than inflation. The only city in New Hampshire that can say that over the last 12 years. That is not coincidence. It was good planning, it was data-driven, and it was focusing on the thing that mattered most, which is the quality of K-12 education. Anybody who's been, of course, has seen a dynamic economy. And I've had some debates with folks, maybe a few in this room, about the intrinsic link between quality of education, the ability to keep taxes low, and a growing economy. They are one and the same. If you do one right, it's amazing how all 3 get a lot better very quickly. And the second thing deals with infrastructure. This is the least sexy word that matters the most. I see some of you glazed over as I say infrastructure. Hopefully not too many. Because here's the thing. New Hampshire, we spend less per capita than most states. But I would argue that in some ways we spend incredibly inefficiently. We have wastewater treatment plants by the town in some cases We have, over decades, gotten away from regionalizing certain core infrastructure services that in most of the country over the last 150 years, I've talked to them when I used to audit cities, and after I was done that career, they would say, when we want to see what America looked like in the 19th century, we come to New Hampshire today. In the way that we structure our school districts, in the way that we structure our school building aid now as we froze school building aid, the way we do wastewater, the way we fund public employee retirement. The state contribution has sloshed down to the local level. And consequently, local governments have done very penny-wise, very pound-foolish things because they're stuck. And what they've done is they've said, as public employees that were full-time retired, increasingly we replace them with retired public employees that we can hire for under 30 hours a week so that we don't have to make the employer contribution anymore into the retirement system. Sounds good today. Not too good in 10 years when all the folks that are retiring and have been made promises to, understandably, are expecting those promises to be kept, but the contributions have been lowered. This is the same mentality as we take costs down from the state to the local level. Taxes didn't go down. They just got transferred to, by and large, your property taxes, or maintenance deferred, or full-time employees being replaced with part-time employees, or educational maintenance that won't happen anytime soon. It is extremely inefficient. It is a poor way to spend money. And take it from this guy who audited cities, who the union leader, when I was mayor, said the election of me as mayor is evidence that fiscal responsibility is alive and well in the state of New Hampshire. Of course, Harold said it, the union leader said it. So when I tell you that I'm going to tell you something that I don't think any other candidate's going to tell you today. Do we have a spending problem? We do, in the sense that we can be more efficient in the local and regionalized manner that I just said. We need more revenue. We need more revenue. Okay, I see people that, I said it twice, I meant it 3 times. Okay, and I think when you have to be frank about the way you're going to get it, and I think the way we get it is where I said a few minutes ago. The business profits tax, $33 million of lost revenue that the businesses themselves weren't asking for, because I was one of the guys asking what they needed and they never said it. When I priced out how much it would cost to do the education reforms that I'm thinking about, to do the infrastructure improvements where the state contributes in the way that we used to, both parties, leadership used to, and the third one, the heroin epidemic. Months before any of this governor stuff came out, I am the chair of my government affairs committee at the Chamber. I asked businesses last fall, what matters most to you? What would you like me to focus on for a program? And they said, parking. Anybody been to Portsmouth lately? Still working on it. Second was housing. Huge issue, by the way, statewide. Different numbers, different definitions, but workforce and affordable housing threatens to really squeeze some of our local economies. And the third was heroin. It has graduated, unfortunately, from becoming simply a personal tragedy to killing hundreds of people a year to the next level. It is actually affecting our economy now. It is affecting our economy in terms of hospitality, hotels, restaurants, the trades, construction, and more. There are literally, in peak season in many of these industries, the inability to find enough people that are not hooked on either prescription drugs or, even worse, heroin and all of the variants of it. So they told me that, and I spent months before any of this. This is part of the reason Stephanie knew I'd been working on this. It is the #1 issue. The economy is always the #1 issue in a macro sense. But in terms of people's lives, in terms of what people are feeling, what their anxiety and fear is about, this has become the #1 issue in a very short amount of time. And so, all the candidates are going to tell you there's a problem. But one of the reasons I got frustrated and said, I think I can do this thing, I can lead. I don't want the title, though you get it when you win. I want the job. There is a job to do. New Hampshire could be #1 in the country in educational outcomes. We can get back to where we used to be in respecting the role of infrastructure and the state's role in it. And in terms of heroin and opiate abuse, it is not simply, I went to different places. I talked to the folks trying to start recovery centers, and law enforcement, and in medicine, and in law enforcement. And what they told me was, we're probably talking about an $8 to $10 million a year additional cost, targeted locally in each of the 13 health centers, where recovery centers are currently being built up. It's not big money relative to what many people think it is, but it's money targeted the right way. It is additional law enforcement in certain places, Manchester being one prominent example. It is legislative change, and I'm very pleased at what Governor Hassan and frankly, bipartisan groups suddenly have been doing in Concord to addressing the legislative needs that we have. But it's also on the recovery side. A lot of our recovery is very short, 28 days sometimes what you hear. It takes more than 28 days to get off of the original problem. And remember that there's a reason why a lot of people fall into the depths of heroin. 4 out of 5 people that use heroin use prescription opiates prior to using heroin. And there's a reason they did. Often it was prescribed because of pain. That pain often didn't get cured. It simply got masked over by the prescription opiate. If we put people on a waiting list, which is what is happening in many of our cities, to go into a recovery, in the time that they wait for the opportunity, they fall back in because we put them right back in the environment where the problem is festering. If we leave them in for 28 days and they go back, the same problem again. It is costing us money. It is hurting our economy. It is destroying lives, even beyond what I think we're aware of over the last few years. It's an $8 to $10 million solution. And the day I announced, I asked the reporters at the opening press conference how much they thought my plan, when I went into great detail, would cost. And I wouldn't tell them until they guessed. The reporters never get asked questions. But I asked them, and they said $50 million, $100 million, $200 million a year. Well, if I thought it was $200 million a year, it'd still be a priority, but it'd be a little bit harder to give you a really good solution to that. But when you do the math, when you do the homework, and it's one of the reasons why I'm running, you get the soapbox, this can be done. And it can be done for a price that not only can we sustain, we have to sustain. This is not a choice. And when I talk to the businesses, between the heroin, I want 2020 to come back in 5 years, to do a follow-up story about how New Hampshire has reversed the heroin epidemic, the brand of New Hampshire has rebounded in that regard, and that we are actually delivering best practices that we need to other states that are suffering the same problem. I want to be the #1 state in America in educational outcomes. We're about number 7 or 8 now. We can be #1. And in terms of infrastructure, I know this is what businesses want. I know it's killing local property taxes because of the way we do it. And I think it's something that we used to do and can do again. I think you need somebody with the background I've got that can say with authority. I don't love raising taxes. I don't love spending lots of money. Look at my record. But when I see a challenge, and it is the #1 set of challenges, when I can identify a solution and price that solution, I want a sustainable way to fund that price and a sustainable solution. And then you got to have the courage to put it out there. If we do that, we will win. And then way more important, we get to lead and we get to make the difference that I think will improve lives and improve our economy and make me even prouder of the state that I'm from. So I'll leave it at that. I'll take questions for whatever balance of time we have. And I appreciate getting the opportunity to be here tonight. Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, hi, I'm Greg Warner. I don't have a question concerning Rockingham County, but rather one concerning Coas County in the North Country. There's a proposal to build a huge, and in my opinion as a former employee of a utility, unnecessary high-tension power line, and we have to stop it. What is your opinion on destroying our natural resource, potentially our scenery, for the profit of an out-of-state company? That's a loaded question.
Luckily, I can give you a very straight answer. I have been opposed to it from day one. If you Google it, you will find editorials from me years ago, not thinking about running for anything, saying as much. It is a place that I used to go to at least once, often twice a month. I mentioned Pittsburgh, West Stewartstown, Colebrook. That is a very meaningful place to me. It's a beautiful part of the state. It is a special part of the state. And Northern Pass is unacceptable.
Thank you.
Just to point to what you said, it does affect Rockingham. The terminus of the Northern Pass is in Deerfield.
That's right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So you talked about both about infrastructure, and then you also talked about jobs and corporations in New Hampshire. Where are you in terms of some folks have talked about rail spur lines, rail lines to Manchester, Boston, and other things like that?
Yeah. You'll notice that I have not mentioned that. It is not because I'm inherently against rail. It is because we have this is how I've looked at it, evaluated it. There are key priorities. I've tried to figure out, you can only be an expert on 1 or 2 things if you're lucky. So the rest of the time you got to go talk to folks that are, and it makes it a very humbling experience to run for office. There are certainly benefits to it, and there are costs. When I look at the greatest priorities facing the economy of New Hampshire, that one in a cost-benefit analysis falls below. It's on my list, but I've given you the priorities that I think give us the best return on investment And I've offered a way to pay for it that I think is roughly equal to the amount that I think it would cost to do those things. But it's on the list. I'm just highlighting the ones that I think are the best bang for the buck. Yes.
Hi, Steve. My name's Tom. I confess to not knowing much about you. I'm from the interior of the state. And so the little bit that I know about you is what Larry just told us. And also the stuff that I found on the web, which said that you're tightly coupled with the no labels movement. And from my point of ignorance, no labels to me is a very strong compromise between Republican and Democrat. So what I'm curious about is two things: how you wound up falling on the Democrat side instead of on the Republican side, and what perhaps makes you uniquely Democratic as opposed to things that you might be willing to compromise. So what are some of the things that you would not compromise on?
Yeah. First, I've been a Democrat since the day I turned 18. A couple weeks after I turned 18, my first vote was for Bill Clinton in the 1992 New Hampshire primary, and I've been a Democrat for, 24 plus years since then. Not all the candidates running for these major offices can say anything like that, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, just a correction about no labels. The organization does not seek to have people that are Democrat become less Democrat or Republican become less Republican. It's saying we live in an environment. This is true in Washington. It's certainly true in New Hampshire as well. Hopefully we'll be all Democratic after this election. I think there's a very good chance of it. But the reality is, Maggie Hassan has been very involved in No Labels since its inception several years ago. Not because she's not a proud Democrat or any less of a Democrat, but because we need to be able to communicate with people that we don't agree with. It doesn't mean we compromise our principles. It means that the reality of a legislative system that's has Republicans, Democrats, and once in a while somebody else in it, we need to be able to find places where we can agree, and where we can't, well, that's the way it is. But to your, so it's not a mushy middle. I would say very strongly, to get to kind of your third question, I feel very passionately that I'm the most progressive candidate in this race. And the reason I say that is there are a number of issues where I think you can be very bold. For example, I don't think there's any other candidate in this race that said with the bluntness, the specificity that I just did, well, there's a way that we can spend money better. It's not fraud, waste, and abuse, and it's not, Craig Benson holding up a carbon paper and saying, aha. It's saying there are ways that we can regionalize certain services in a way that saves money. But we need more revenue. That is something that I think sometimes feel like we're afraid to say. I think we've mislearned some of the lessons from past successful governors, and somehow you're not allowed to say that. I think you can say that. But if you do, you've got to be really highly credible from your own record in public life as an elected official in particular, and as an auditor in my case, to be able to say, here's the result. Here's my work, my homework, that shows why, and somebody that you can trust with taxes and spending. But I would legalize pot tomorrow. I would abolish the death penalty tomorrow. I oppose gambling, any expansion in gambling, and always have. I'm 100% pro-choice. I've supported marriage equality since well before that became the law of New Hampshire and then obviously the country. I'm a proud environmentalist. There are a lot of Republicans I love on a personal level, and I always try to find ways to agree with them. I married one. But it doesn't mean we agree on everything political. But we do agree on how to raise kids really well, how to be a really good spouse, how to be a good community member. I find no party affiliation on those core values, and that's where I try to find cooperation wherever I can with people.
Thank you.
Yes?
Steve, are you going to take the pledge?
Well, I will tell you this. I do not support, and I can tell you why, I do not support an income tax or sales tax. Let me start with that. I don't support a sales tax because I do think it's highly regressive. I think out of all the options for raising revenue, I know that you can do things to take certain kinds of purchases off of the rolls of it, and that can help a little. That's difficult to maintain without it being regressive, so that's a sales tax. In terms of the income tax, my experience, and I'm somebody that worked for Mark Fernald in 2002, I cut my teeth on that here in New Hampshire. I'm very familiar with the issue. Mark's a great guy, and I agree with him that property taxes are a killer, and he's very articulate on that issue. My concern on that is in every state in the last handful of states that have put one in the name of trying to take the pressure off the property tax, what ends up happening is you end up with the same property tax within a period of years, and then an income tax. And so it has the effect, though unintended by its sponsors, of ending up being regressive and adding taxes for the people that the last thing they need, like my folks, is an additional tax burden. That said, I have challenged, and I did it in my opening day. I know Chris Newton. I know Jamie Forrester. I know Ted Gassis. I know them all in different ways. Not bad people. Shouldn't be governor. All right? Shouldn't be governor. And I would like the reporters to start asking them to take some pledges once in a while. Take the pledge and stop trying to defund Planned Parenthood. It's funny, on every other issue, okay, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
But on this one issue, and this is where I think the fear of saying, might need a little more revenue. You're not, it's as if you say that, you've passed a Rubicon. Well, while my solution, and I've been very specific, is not the income tax or the sales tax, it is specific, it is real, it is in my, it's what I believe, and it's something that we need to do in order to do the things that the businesses actually did ask for to improve the economy. Yes and yes. Yeah, John.